faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books worldwide. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're interpreting the book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. The author of The General Theory is British economist John Maynard Keynes, known as the father of post-war prosperity. He served as an advisor to the UK Treasury, a director of the Bank of England, the first president of the World Bank, and deeply influenced global economic policies. Keynes's main theories are in the book we're discussing today, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. For convenience, we'll shorten Keynes's book to The General Theory. But first, let's answer a quick question. Why is this book called The General Theory? So-called The General Theory, in English, is general theory, meaning a general or comprehensive theory. The overall theory from Adam Smith to the general theory, orthodox Western economics before its publication, was called the classical school by Keynes. Keynes believed that previous classical economics theories were a kind of special case. In other words, the classical school's views only hold true under specific circumstances, while Keynes's economics reveals more general and comprehensive laws. That's the meaning of the general theory in the title. As a great scholar, Keynes not only pointed out flaws in the old classical theories, but also built a new economic theory, creating a rich, detailed world of economics that set an example for future scholars. For instance, classical school scholars often had unclear concepts or principles in economics, inconsistent terms, and core ideas buried in various arguments. Keynes meticulously summarized and organized these concepts and principles, even defining key terms like income, savings, and investment, and the early chapters of the general theory. Keynes aimed to ground economics in solid math and logic, which made the general theory tough to read, but pushed economics toward a more formal and professional path. The book's title, The General Theory, clearly tells us its main content revolves around three issues: employment, interest, and money. Next, I'll break down each of these three issues for you. Finally, I'll cover the global impact of the general theory, starting with the first issue, employment. According to classical economists like Say and Pigou, employment wasn't a problem at all. Capitalism shouldn't have unemployment. Say was another key economist in the classical school after Adam Smith and David Ricardo, who made Smith's economic theories more accessible and systematic. Say's law could be considered one of the theoretical foundations of the classical school. This law asserts that supply creates its own demand, as in simple barter economies where producers directly exchange goods. When a worker produces a good to prevent devaluation, they have strong incentive to immediately exchange it for others' products. This means every product created generates demand for other products. Thus, supply and demand naturally balance through market exchange with no overproduction or unemployment in society. Later scholars, after Say, argued that even with money as an exchange medium, instead of direct barter, Say's optimistic conclusion remained valid. Capitalism simply shouldn't have unemployment or overproduction. But in the 1930s, the global Great Depression brought severe unemployment. Statistics and vivid examples irrefutably proved massive unemployment existed in the real capitalist world. Faced with this reality, classical scholars still clung to their views. Indeed, they explained two types of unemployment: frictional unemployment, temporary job transition periods. The other is voluntary unemployment, workers refusing jobs due to low wages. Classical scholars believed Great Depression unemployment resulted from these two causes. So unemployment wasn't a capitalist system failure, but workers' own issues, changing jobs or striking for higher wages. These factors caused unemployment. So what's the solution? Classical economists advised workers to stop protesting, accept lower wages, and return to work. The classical school's theories sound overly biased toward capitalists. In the general theory, Keynes said classical professors might sympathize with workers, but rigid theory forced them to claim unemployment's root cause was workers refusing wage cuts. In fact, faced with economic realities, classical economists' views on employment were not just wrong, but absurd. To solve real problems, Keynes introduced his new theory. Keynes said that ideal state described by classical economists, where everyone's employed except during job transitions or wage disputes, was a special case called full employment. Full employment means anyone capable of working and willing to work can find satisfactory employment. And people work efficiently, not two people splitting one job. When society achieves full employment, classical economists are correct. Only frictional and voluntary unemployment exist. But the problem is society rarely operates at full employment. So when does society reach full employment? Simply put, when aggregate demand equals aggregate supply. A view classical economists found baffling, since, say, classical economics held that supply naturally creates equivalent demand, so aggregate supply and demand always balance. How could aggregate demand and supply ever be unequal? But Keynes countered effective demand determines outcomes, not automatic equilibrium. For all products to sell, producers need sufficient purchasing power. If workers' wages are too low, they can't buy goods, leading to unsold products and surplus. The core issue during the 1930s unemployment crisis was insufficient effective demand. What exactly is insufficient effective demand? After Keynes' definition, effective demand consists of consumption and investment demand. Insufficiency occurs when psychological factors make capitalists reluctant to invest and consumers hesitant to spend. These psychological factors include fear of losses, saving for emergencies, or stock market speculation. Insufficient effective demand prevents full employment and can trigger economic crises. Marx noted in his Reproduction and Crisis theory, capitalists focus on profits without considering workers' consumption capacity, causing demand shortages and inevitable capitalist crises. Keynes' theory sounded somewhat similar to Marx's. So some conservatives, like former U.S. President Hoover, attacked him as a Marxist, though Keynes never considered himself one. He viewed his theory as an evolution of Western economic tradition, where classical theory became a special case within his framework. Based on the general theory, Keynes analyzed the 1930s crisis causes and proposed solutions. Keynes believed overcoming crises required boosting national income, increasing effective demand to achieve full employment. Compared to Pigou's wage-cutting solution, Keynes's approach was more progressive and significant. The breakthrough of the general theory shattered capitalism's automatic full employment myth and revealed crisis mechanisms. Additionally, Keynes recognized capitalism's flaw in unequal wealth distribution, such as the existence of a rentier class. This observation again resembled Marx's analysis, but Keynes sought solutions within capitalism. His analysis of interest and money led Keynes to see the rentier class as detrimental. The general theory proposed eliminating rentiers through a prolonged transition. Keynes suggested two methods. First, increasing capital abundance to reduce scarcity. This would prevent rentiers from profiting passively. Second, having enlightened elites contribute expertise for reasonable compensation, rather than capital-derived excess returns. So let's summarize part one of the general theory. Keynes argued classical economics' frictional or voluntary unemployment model only applied during full employment. But reality shows societies rarely achieve full employment, causing overproduction and unemployment. Solving this requires raising incomes so workers can purchase goods, reducing overproduction and joblessness, Additionally, Keynes identified capitalism's flaw, the existence of a rentier class. He believed that by increasing capital abundance and moral persuasion, this class would gradually fade away. Well, now,